Bit of both.
Bit of both. So we go back into the parables, and Stephen Adams was happy to say, like, you know, I can go ahead and spend my money frivolously. Those are resources that I just don't to people who strangers. I just don't. If I want to give my resources to strangers, sure, that's great, but I don't. What do I think?
I think it is okay to worry and want to help other people in fast, faraway lands, but I think the moment it starts being a detriment to your own happiness is when it starts becoming something that you should disconnect from.
Peter Singer's answer to this is, you know, whether we think this is a good answer or not. His answer is, helping people is enjoyable. You like it. His point is like, actually, if we follow his view that we do have obligations to others, we'll find that this is actually a rewarding thing. You know, and obviously there's a point at which I've given so much that now the comparable spitting is laying out. Like, my life is achievable. But things, you know, that only comes after, you know, I've gotten what's the benefit from helping people out. But it's actually better than that. So he actually says that in fact, we are imagining this is not going to be good for us to help out people. But if we actually do it, we'll find that not only are their lives improved, so are ours.
I think he's right in the certain sense that you can have like unlimited amount of empathy, but I think it's also that you can have empathy for everybody at just different levels. I think, like when you think about like rule of mere exposure, like obviously you're going to care a little bit more about like your neighbor than some random guy who lives in Timbuktu.
Yeah.
But you can also still care about him, even if you don't care quite as much. It's like people that you don't relate to quite as much. Like I might not have as much empathy for a billionaire than I would for someone who has the same financial standing as me. It's like, oh no, why don't you go cry about it? But it's
Yeah,
like, someone
it's
like me, it's like, oh, well, I feel bad because I could be in a similar situation.
in some ways, Peter Singer here is battling against some just truths about human nature.
Yeah.
Someone's very far away from us, it's hard for us to think about.
But it's also human nature, I think, to be concerned for other people because they're human beings.
Yeah.
Because
Empathy is natural, right?
like if you take one monkey and you see another monkey fall down, he's gonna be like, oh, help the other monkey stand up. That's just how our brains work, I think.
It is. It is.
You feel like empathy whether you want to or not. Like you cringe because you think, oh, that would hurt to fall down, even if you didn't fall down.
My head hurts.
Okay. For the sake of time, I'm going to move on to our review for the exam. So we'll talk more about obligations. Okay. So after our mind backwards.
Finally.
Okay, so we started this unit discussing environmental ethics and all of that stuff.
Thank you.
So way back there. What? You read that stuff?
Yeah.
Great ability.
No, it's not.
Anything on there you want me to talk about?
Or
E? Yeah, so I want you to be able to think about
What are the sources?
how we address these environmental problems. And you know, we can take individual actions. I could walk to the store instead of driving or whatever. I can plant a tree. You know, I can put my sweater on and keep the heat turned down. So those are all individual things we can do. And there's a whole lot of things I can do, right? But the problem is so gigantic, so huge, that in the grand scheme of things, those individual actions are very, very, very small. And by themselves, they're not going to solve this problem. have focused attention on environmental problems for the last 40 or 50 years has been to emphasize the importance of individual actions. You, the consumer, you, the citizen, you go out there and change your behaviors. And if you do, we're going to solve this problem together. So that's how we have collectively tackled these questions for quite a long time. I want to contrast that with broad social solutions to environmental problems. These aren't individual actions. These are things like change the mileage standard for automobiles so they don't consume as much gasoline, don't use as much pollution. Switch from burning coal power to renewable sources of energy. Things like that, right? So reforestation, big stuff. Which is going to solve the problem? Well, the latter, right? The broad social solutions are going to solve it. Individual actions are not going to. They won't. Right? They're not going to. That creates kind of existential and weird set of choices for us, right? Because the things that are in my power to do, if I'm the only person doing them, they're not going to do anything. So then, should I do them at all? Or should I say, who cares? I'm not going to bother. And obviously, I think that all those individual actions are very important to take. I think it's good for you as a human being to do them. But I think the reasons why you do them are not purely practical. They're not things you do if they're not going to solve this problem. I do it because I want to be a part of a practice which is harmful to the planet and other people. That kind of makes sense? Yeah. If you really want to solve this problem, these sets of innovative problems, you have to have broad social solutions. It's the only way. Those will not be forthcoming in the next 2 years. So, I mean, that's the only way to do it. So the next 2 years, we're not really going to be addressing these problems, but that puts us all in kind of existential dilemma. But I guess I just want you to have an awareness of that tension between those two kinds of solutions, and how that puts us, more speaking, in a bit of a pickle, so to speak. If that answers your question more. And you should have some knowledge just about the kinds of things that do affect the climate in terms of like what your behaviors are, the things that contribute to carbon and atmosphere. I assume you guys have some awareness of those things. Moral hazard? So a moral hazard is kind of
Ecological crisis,
moral
post-war
hazard
damages.
is
What is
a
a moral
situation
hazard?
that lures you into a behavior you would not otherwise engage in, a behavior that is harmful to others or to yourself. But the harm is very, very far away in place or in time. So it's a hazard because the consequence of the behavior is negative, but you don't see it. It's so far away that you're lured into the behavior. And so, I mean, the very, very simple case of that is just driving a car. Right? Pollution, but, we know the effect is there. We also know, well, I gotta get where I'm going, so I just drive a car. As opposed to something like, if I push you over, I can see right away, oh, there's a negative effect associated with that. When I push you over, you got hurt. I won't do that again. Right? So that's not a moral hazard. I'm not tempted to do it. But producing carbon pollution, whether individually, whether as nations, as corporations, all the sources of carbon emissions, they're lured into the behavior because the consequence is so far away that you kind of get away with it. So we keep putting off action because, and this goes back to the guy who's in the ring, right? Or it goes back to the trolley pop and pulling the lever versus the guy on the bridge. It's far away. Who cares? Yeah.
2C.
Oh yeah. So the article. Going back up here real quick. his claim in the article is that the problem, the reason for this predicament is that basically y'all are consuming too much. You're buying too much stuff. And he says that we consume things in pursuit of happiness for ourselves, individual happiness. That's why you go and buy a latte at Starbucks when you come here in the morning or whatever, right? We consume stuff. And so that is a path that we've carved out for individual happiness for ourselves. So we go back to John Stuart Mill. John Stuart Mill, wants a world where, as consequentialists, we're all pursuing the greatest happiness for everybody. And his critique in the article is, well, what has happened is we are equating individual happiness. We're equating happiness with individual consumption of private goods and experiences. So happiness is kind of a private thing that you engage in by consuming the thing. And the consequence is, y'all just go to play. So his critique is that we're going to have to just give up happiness if we're going to solve this problem. Now, I think that I don't really agree with this. Just personally, I don't really agree with this argument.
Consumption to stop climate change?
I do think that, if you're not careful, I'll start talking about leaf blowers again. So let's just stay away from leaf blowers. But I do think we should stop our consumption of stuff. But I think his claim is that means you're going to have to give up on being happy. And I think that, no. We can find happiness in ways that are not related to consumption, that come from a kind of public and social happiness that comes from living a good life with other human beings. Those things are not dependent upon this kind of consumer, cheap, disposable consumption. In other words, we shift happiness away from kind of private consumption of stuff towards a kind of public acknowledgement of one another in society. Those things don't cost environment. In fact, actually, they can lead to the worse. So I think his understanding what brings happiness is a little. But yeah, again, the big question here is: are consumers to blame for the predicament we're in? And the answer is both yes and no. Sure. Yeah, we bought too many things. We made too many straws. Too many leaf blowers.
Instead of buying like apples in plastic packages, you still need to eat apples.
Plastic packages. We could have plastic packages. But anyway, but the problem. So yes, the consumption individually has gotten us here, but also consumption happening over and beyond what's happening at an individual level. Right? The big sources of emissions are not related to my consumption at all. They are the actions of corporations, the actions of militaries, the actions of governments. These are big sources of pollution that I have nothing to do with. Right? And I think it's a mistake to assume, look, the message has been given out to you since you were born. It's your fault that we destroyed the economy because you chose badly. You screwed up. You did it wrong. Straws just, you just give it a straw. You drop it in the water, right? It's like a family. Here's supply of straws here. It just happens. We didn't choose it. It just happened. So that kind of consumption is happening all the time without our choosing. So that's again that dichotomy between individual.
And for the pleasure part, I think that it's directly linked to consumption. And if you're not doing that, even if you have like social happiness and you have a lot of thought, if you're not happy, if you're not having pleasure that you have through consumption.
Well, this is a great question, right? Aristotle makes it very clear, pleasure is part of happiness. And part of that is material. Like there's stuff, you gotta have some stuff.